Welcome in this new video in which I'm going to recommend you 5 recent Hong Kong films. The recommendation I'm going to make are pure Hong Kong films. So if you are not very aware of what I mean by pure Hong Kong films compared to the Chinese Hong Kong co-production, I recommend you to check the video I did about the state of Hong Kong cinema. I did a video, Is Hong Kong Cinema Dead? And a follow-up video about the state of Hong Kong cinema, in which I go at length about what happened to the Hong Kong film industry. And so if you want to understand what I mean by what is a pure Hong Kong film, then I suggest you check this video first. So let's start with the first film I want to recommend you, and that's Number 1 Chung Ying Street, which was directed by Derek Chiu in 2018. What is the story of Number 1 Chung Ying Street? It's basically 2 stories, and each time stories of 3 teenagers during a troubled time in Hong Kong history. And the first trio of teenagers is during the 1967 riots, and the second set of characters is slightly after the event of 2014, which was Occupy Central, the Umbrella Revolution. So if you are not very aware of that, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction about these events. The 1967 riots were basically the offshoot of the Cultural Revolution, which was happening in mainland China back then. And at some point, the communist groups in Hong Kong tried to not necessarily overthrow, but well, sometimes a bit. So they tried to fight against the colonial authority and to have some change, to have to basically have the British give up their authority on the city. And that led to a lot of protests, that led to a lot of fights, that led to also a bombing campaign which lasted several months. And at the end of it, the communist side lost its support. And it ended up being beaten by the colonial authority, even if sometimes through some dubious methods. And 2014 Occupy Central, that was a time when, following the white paper from Beijing about the system, or the election system, in order for Hong Kong people to vote for the chief executive, was refused by a majority of the population, and that led to the occupation of 3 districts of Hong Kong, which lasted for several weeks. And what is interesting in Number 1 Chung Ying Street is that Derek Chiu put those 2 stories, put those 2 social movements in parallel, but he doesn't really take any side. He doesn't say the one who did it in 1967 are bad guys, the one who did it in 2014 are the good ones. He just shows what these people believed in and what they wanted to achieve. And I think that makes the film much more powerful this way, because you can see that there are indeed some similarities between the 2 social movements, and you see also there are some differences in them, but that stimulates your brain, your thinking, and that push you to think about these kind of events and what makes them different, and how would you react, all these kind of things. I mean, it brings a lot of questions which are very stimulating, which are very interesting as a person. And if you are also interested, of course, in Hong Kong, the situation now, and the history of Hong Kong, that's also a very interesting film. The film was made with a fairly small budget. It's an independent production, but despite the difficulties that it brought, it managed to recreate the mood and the atmosphere of this 2 times pretty well, in my opinion. Unfortunately, the film didn't receive the attention it should have had, in my opinion. Probably because the people, the people who were more from the 1967 side didn't like the idea of being compared to the one of 2014, and the opposite is true as well. So at the end, the movie, I guess, antagonized both sides, and that made it difficult to get the audience to watch it. But I think it's really a very well-made film, one of the best from Derek Chu. Derek Chu, who is all-time director now. I mean, he started doing films in the early 90s after having been on TV for a while. And he's a director who always had a strong social conscience. I mean, he always deal with a dramatic subject that's not your average action comedy Hong Kong director. And I think in these events he found the perfect subject for him. And unfortunately, as I say, the movie was not really a commercial success, and I'm not sure he will be able to go in this direction. But I would really have liked to see him continue this way. But anyway, the film is very recommended. I hope you will have a look at it and you will appreciate it. The second film I want to advise you to watch is another film from 2018, and that's J Affairs, directed by Lee Chuk-pan. And this movie is part of a governmental initiative which was started a few years ago for first-time directors, young directors, for them to do their first feature film. And Lee Chuk-pan is someone who has been an assistant director for several years already, and that's his first film. It's a very interesting film in the way it is built, because you can see there have been a lot of thinking about the story, the way it is organized, and the way you make it cinematographically through editing, through the direction. It may be a bit confusing because you have a lot of characters, and sometimes, at least at the beginning, it can be a bit confusing about how to understand how they articulate with each other. But through the film, you will finally get it. And the depiction it makes of Hong Kong is pretty dark. I mean, behind the surface of this prosperous society, it's showing all the kind of rotten behaviors, be it the teacher of the film or the corrupt cops, which is played by Chap Man To, and I think it's unfortunately accurate, at least partially. I mean, there is indeed a lot of dubious things happening in Hong Kong, and especially those days. But no, the thing which makes it also especially interesting, in my opinion, is that I don't think in the future we will see such films being produced through this governmental initiative. Since the introduction of the national security law, there is a good chance that they are going to be much more selective when it comes to the kind of story that they are going to produce. And a film like this, which is showing corrupt cops, which is showing some of the social problems of Hong Kong, I don't think it's going to be supported by the government in the future. And that makes it even more worthy to have a film like J Affairs. And so I really advise you to watch it. The third film I'm going to recommend is Still Human, directed by Oliver Chan in 2018 as well. Still Human is another film which was produced under this governmental initiative I talk about for J Affairs. And it deals with a former construction worker who has become handicapped and who has to hire a domestic helper to help him for his everyday life. So you may not be aware of what domestic helpers are. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to this phenomenon. It's basically people from third world countries, in the case of Hong Kong, mostly from Philippines and Indonesia, usually women, who are hired under a special status, a domestic helper status, which doesn't grant them all the rights that you would have if you are working normally in Hong Kong, and which makes them also much less paid compared to the normal Hong Kong people. And it's a way to compensate for the lack of social policies in Hong Kong. Basically the lack of care home for the elderly or for kindergarten, all these kind of things, that's basically domestic helpers who are taking care of it for a reduced cost. And the problem with that is that most of the time these people are considered as second-class citizens. There is a lot of abuse going on, and there is a lot of moral questions which go with it. So much so that some associations consider it as modern slavery, which actually I agree with. And so that's the background of the story of Still Human. And we follow the domestic helper, the new domestic helper just arrived from Philippines, having to work for Anthony Wong. And there is an interesting dynamic, an interesting relationship which develops between the two during the course of the film. It's not a romantic comedy style. It's much more realistic, but it has also a light comedic side. So it's very well balanced when it comes to comedy and drama. It's very well acted. Of course, you can expect it with Anthony Wong. But that's also the case for the newcomers, Chriselle Constangy, who is playing the domestic helper. It's really refreshing. It's full of heart, and it has a lot of positive vibes from it. And it's very nice to see Hong Kong people pay attention and listen to the situation and the life of domestic helpers in Hong Kong, because as I said, unfortunately, they are more often treated as second-class citizens. And surprisingly, the film was also a big success in Hong Kong, so that's also something encouraging and making me a bit hopeful that their situation, their status will evolve and they will be better treated and better considered over time. So for all these reasons, Still Human, a really nice film, very nice film to watch, which I advise you to check as soon as you can. Fourth recommendation is from 2019, and that's A Home with a View, directed by Herman Yeo. That's the only film I'm not completely sure if it is a purely Hong Kong film or if it was made under a co-production agreement. I didn't manage to get the clear information. But even if it had been a co-production, it's still extremely Hong Kongese in its spirit. So we follow a family who finally get their dream apartment, and when they get in this dream apartment, they realize that their view is blocked by a big publicity billboard. And so they are going to do all they can in order to get rid of this billboard, which is making their dream, which is preventing their dream to become true. The film is an adaptation of a play by Chung Tat-ming, who is actually also playing in the film. And so it's a dark comedy. It's very funny and also very, very smart in the way it shows the social problems that Hong Kong is facing, because that's basically the real estate problem. Hong Kong has a real estate problem for decades. There is the prices for renting or buying flats here are out of this world. So that's being illustrated here in a funny, witty, but also dark way. Herman Yeo, with the director, has done a lot of films, but I think he is someone who always has a social conscience. I mean, he's aware of the problems that there is in Hong Kong, and He's always trying to put a bit of message, to put some attention on them, and he's able to do that with A Home with a View, and he does it with talent, in my opinion. He's also helped by a good cast with many veterans of the industry. We have Francis Ng, we have Anita Yuen, we have Louis Koo, of course. Louis Koo is in all Hong Kong films nowadays. So this whole mix of good cast, talented and motivated director on a good material, which provides what you need of laugh, but also makes you think and reflect about the social problem there is in Hong Kong. So all that combined to make from A Home with a View for a very good film to watch. It was actually released surprisingly during the time of Chinese New Year. It's not really the kind of films you want to see during Chinese New Year, so that was a surprising choice. And of course the film didn't make any wave at the box office in Hong Kong when it was released last year. But in my opinion, that's actually one of the most interesting films which was released for Chinese New Year. So yeah, despite its commercial failure, I think it's really worth checking, and so I would recommend you to have a look and try your chance on the film. And the final film I want to advise you to watch is We Are Legend, directed by Daniel Chan in 2019 as well. Daniel Chan is someone who has worked for several years for Wong Jing. He has done films like Sifu vs. Vampire, for example, which are decent offerings, but it's more Wong Jing film in spirit than its own. And We Are Legend is really his own film. That's really an act of love, because he has worked on it for several years. He's someone who is very into jiu-jitsu, into martial arts, and so he wanted to do something, to do a drama around that subject, and he finally was able to do it with We Are Legends. So We Are Legends follow two brothers who are involved into mixed martial arts. One of them is doing underground fight, and the other one wants to become a champion in an official organization. And there have been quite a few good films about MMA now. The novelty aspect of having MMA fight is gone now, and there have already been some very good films on the subject, such as Warriors, the Hollywood film, or Unbeatable by Dante Lam with Nick Chung. But We Are Legends managed to find a unique perspective when it comes to the subject, which makes it really worthwhile in my opinion, because it's not just about becoming famous, becoming a great martial artist. That's more about how do you deal with difficulties in your life, how do you deal with failure, how do you manage to get back from there. And that's a really unique perspective, which I think only someone who has been in a gym, who has participated in competition, can really bring it to the table. It's the film version, I would say, of the speech made by Sylvester Stallone in Rocky Balboa, when he's saying that you are going to be hit by life, but you should always stand up and keep going. And that's really the spirit of We Are Legends, and it's very well conveyed. It has an interesting cast of new young actors who are all very motivated, who are really giving it 100%, either for the dramatic scene, either for the action scenes. I especially like the lady, Wiona Young. I think she has a lot of potential. Hopefully she will be able to do more films, to keep having interesting parts. So for all these reasons, We Are Legends is a big recommendation in my book, and I hope you will really appreciate it. That's it. 5 Hong Kong films, 5 Hong Kong recent films. I hope this video will make you want to watch some of them. Don't hesitate to post your opinion on these films in the comment section. Don't hesitate to ask any question if you have, and I will see you back in another video very soon.